Thank you and good morning. Um, Let me start out with a little story that I was thinking about as we continue to evolve how we incentivize everyone to think and produce innovation in design and construction with the goal of increasing productivity and reducing cost. Um, a number of years ago, I was actually a superintendent in commercial construction for quite a while before I started my owner's representation firm. I was in charge of a 48-story building in Seattle that had a 90-foot excavation. At that time, it was one of the deepest in the country, and we had traditionally in Seattle, we had conflicts between the shoring contractor and the excavation contractor. They both seemed to want to work in the same spot at the same time, and there was always a conflict as to who hauled out the spoils and how they got paid for them and all that kind of stuff. And I'd been through a couple projects where it was difficult at best and affected costs and productivity and all that sort of thing. So I went to the owner and I asked them if we could, and we were on a tight schedule. The building was 100% leased out before we started the construction, and was also in a period of, if you remember, of high inflation and high interest rates. They actually hit 19 or 20% during the time of this construction project, so it was a number of years ago. Anyway, the owner allowed me to offer the excavation contractor and the shoring contractor a bonus if they finished by a certain date. And I pulled two major characters in construction into my office, and I told them, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you this pile of dough if you finish the shoring and excavation in time, so that by Memorial Weekend, the next day, I can start the big mat foundation, which at that time seemed like a big mat. It was 6,500 cubic yards, but pales in comparison to today. Anyway, they looked at each other and they said, we don't need you anymore. Get out of the flippin' office. We're going to take over. And it was unbelievable, the coordination that they figured out on how to do this. And they actually achieved the goal, and we paid them the bonus. And the reason I bring that up is we have to get to a point where we're incentivizing people so that they will collaborate and figure out the ways that only their skill sets can really, and knowledge can provide the opportunity to increase the productivity in our industry. So with that, we're task group 3. We're tasked with trying to figure out ways to incentivize innovation in the design and construction industry. This is our group, and all involved. We've had one meeting. We have another meeting scheduled for before Thanksgiving. We have struggled with trying to figure this out, of how we go about getting our hands around incentivizing for increasing in productivity. And part of the reason that we've struggled with it is that our industry is well, I called it the world of concrete. And you think about it, it's designers and engineers and contractors and subcontractors and code officials and different agencies and different DOTs and all that kind of stuff. And so one size, one shoe does not fit all people, all groups. So our first meeting was, and I apologize for the smallness of the type, but our first meeting we talked about what are the barriers for innovation, and I'll just read through a few of them so you have an idea. And this is available. This will be available so you can read through it. And I would invite anyone who has commentary to please contact us and throw your knowledge and your experience in the ringer with other issues, problems, because we're trying to align things so that we can develop some incentives that'll be maybe not universal, but it'll be guidelines for folks. But anyway, there's a reluctance by specifiers to consider anything new. And they generally say that they're liability issues. What's the incentive of the engineer and the engineering side to do something new? Little, if any, incentive. Also has to do with liability and fees that they get paid, that sort of thing. Private owners don't seem too interested in innovation. They have a short window of opportunity. I find that to be true sometimes and not true other times. It depends on the owner and what they're trying to achieve. The merchant builders seem to just want to get their buildings built and on the market and sold so that they can do another one. Public works groups like the Navy, for example, have a longer service lives and can more easily push for innovation on their projects. DOTs, they function like 50 different owners, each with their own procedures and set of interests. There are many communication layers to work through. Unleashing the knowledge of the concrete trade contractor during construction and design is paramount. So we got one comment was made that there are so many steps for someone like a subcontractor or a tier subcontractor who has a good idea to go through, and they oftentimes can't even talk to the people that can affect the change. So they go from a sub-tier contractor to maybe supplier to subcontractor to the GC to the construction manager if there is one on the job. And then maybe that'll get to the designer and architect and the engineer and the specifier. So breaking down that pathway, so perhaps it could be in parallel or in group rather than sequential, I think is a big problem that we need to address. Communication around the project is difficult and convoluted. Just building on what the last point is I made. No one is asking what's the best way to get this done. Well, I think that many people are asking that question, but they're asking it in a silo or in a box to where the whole group should be involved in figuring out the best way to get it done. Because if I figure out a good way to get things done, if someone else can help me get that done, the whole project benefits. Time dependencies, which Rashid mentioned. There's a short window to get these things done. And oftentimes private developers are pushing very hard to get things started before the documents are done, that sort of thing, which also leaves a short period of time to talk about how we improve the construction productivity and get the incentives in place that will benefit everyone. And then a big one is pre-construction participation and compensation. So much of the time in our industry, we give our ideas away and don't get paid for them. And we need to get that changed somehow. Owner goals and requirements, better communication to all team members. So lots and lots of different barriers. The reason we did that is we want to break down those barriers and try to analyze them and figure out the commonality in the barriers and the opportunities to solve those issues within the barriers. So our first meeting was a good meeting. It was exploratory. Like I said, we've all had a lot of difficulty in getting our hands around this, and we're just starting to get our hands around it now in a really good way. So identifying the opportunities across a matrix of industry groups, I think, is one way that we can start to get our hands around this. So why innovate? It's a large topic. These are the three major items that we identified: reduce cost, produce a better product, expand the concrete market. I don't remember whether Phil or maybe it was Carrie that said if something is simpler and easier to build, it'll go faster, less expensive, less problems with potential injury, which is a big issue in our industry, and reduce cost. So simplifying things is a big, big part of this. So this is just a listing of, partial listing of all the different people that are involved in our industry that we need to get involved in some way, even if they're, and they vary depending upon the type of project too. One of our members said that the DOT is 50 different owners, and 50 different ideas on how to go about things. Rich is smiling. So there's also geographic influences and market sector influences. So commercial buildings, office and hotel, high-rise residential buildings, multifamily, mid-rise, hospitals, industrial buildings. One that I didn't put on here because I didn't think about it at the time was biotechnology facilities and pharmaceutical facilities. I built one of the first laboratories to culture AIDS virus a number of years ago, and it was wonderful working with the scientists, in part because although they cared about what the construction cost was, and the designers cared about what the construction costs were and the design was, they wanted a facility that worked and gave us the opportunity to work together so that we could create an incredible laboratory to actually at the time it was $4,500 a square foot. This was 1988, 1989. Imagine what that cost today. But it was a fantastic deal where everybody collaborated. And I think one of the themes that keeps running through everything we're talking about is collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. And the earlier it can take place, the better off we all are. And it builds on each other and builds on everything. If somebody has a good idea, well, that won't quite work the way you'd like it to, but maybe we can make it work this way and get everybody together to start talking about how these ideas can work. So in the past, one of my professors in school said that once a design is complete, 95% of the opportunity to be innovative is gone. You only have 5%, as a general rule, opportunity to affect the cost and the schedule of the project. And generally that's left up to the contractor. Well, we need to tap that 95% opportunity and get involved in the design, which is one of the themes that's underlying everything we're saying here. So where do we go from here? We've proposed 2 white papers initially, one to further identify and discuss the barriers to innovation. We hope to refine those in a better way so that we can continue to get our hands around them, and then identify differences and similarities and develop a strategy to attack them. Then I believe that we need to go outside our general group and speak to owners, architects, engineers. There's a lot of engineers involved in this group here, code authorities and more, in order to talk to them about how we facilitate the idea of innovation in construction within our concrete industry. Lastly, I think one of the things that we're going to try to do in probably the next series of white papers is develop some prototype thoughts on what an incentive looks like, so that we can present that to our industry as examples, so that if you've got an owner, an architect, or an engineer can say, well, you know, if I had this incentive, whether it's more fee or the opportunity to earn more fee, I could spend a little bit more time on this and we can develop these ideas further. Same with a contractor. Perhaps there's a way to provide an incentive fee so that they can increase their fee and reduce their risk to build on. But rather than letting everybody having everybody try to figure out what those incentives might be, we're going to try to give some examples that people can use in the future as a practical means. So anyway, that's the main discussion. I look forward to reporting more in the future. And I invite anyone who has any ideas or thoughts, comments, whatever it might be, please let us know. Thank you.